Okay, it's good to see everybody. So today is a very special day. In the Vaishnav calendar, it is Ram Nomi, the appearance day of Lord Ram. So today we're going to be speaking about Lord Ram. And, all right, let's chant first. Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram, Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram. Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram, Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram. Raghupati Raghava Rajaram, Patita Pavana Sita Ram. Raghupate Raghava Rajara Patita Pavana Sita Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Ram. Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Ram, Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Ram. Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram, Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram. Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram, Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram. Raghupati Raghava Rajaram, Patita Pavana Sita Ram. Raghupati Raghava Rajaram, Patita Pavana Sita Ram. Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram, Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram. Shri Ram Jaya Ram, Jaya Jaya Ram, Shri Ram Jaya Ram, Jaya Jaya Ram. Jai Om Vishnu Paramahansa. Vaishnav Vrinda Gajai, Namacharya Shidahira Thakur Gajai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha, Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Gajai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopigopada Sayam Kunda, Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Gajai, Vrindavanam Gajai, Maturadam Gajai, Jagadata Sami Gajai, Yamunamai Kajai, Shimani Lasi Devi Kajai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Kajai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. Okay. So, Omagana Tibidanda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, to start off today's class, it's tonight for some of you, we want to read a verse from the Bhagavatam, 9th canto, 10th chapter. I think it's the second or third verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Srila Prabhupada writes about the pastimes of Lord Ram, and then we'll speak a little bit about the pastimes after I read this verse. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Maybe someone could turn the heater down a little bit. It's a little hot in here, isn't it? It's kind of hot. It's like a sauna bath. Whew. So I'll just read the verse since you don't have it on the screen. Tasyapi Bhagavan Hesha Sakshad Ramanaiho Harihi Sham Sena Chaturda Gat Putratvam Praratita Surai Rama Lakshmana Bharata Shatrugna Iti Sanghiya. And so, I guess we'll read the word by word synonyms. Tasha, of him, Maharaj Dasharatha. Api, also, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Esha, all of them. Sakshad, directly. Abrahmamayaha, the Supreme Para Brahman, the Absolute Truth. Harehi, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Amsha Amshena, by an expansion of a plenary portion. Chaturda, by fourfold expansions. Agat, accepted. Putratvam, sonhood. Prartitaha, being prayed for. Surai, by the demigods. Rama, Lord Ramachandra. Lakshmana, Lord Lakshmana. Bharata, Lord Bharata. Shatrugnaha, and Lord Shatrugna. Iti, thus, Sangya, by different names. Okay, translation. Being prayed for by the demigods, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth Himself, directly appeared with His expansion and expansions of the expansion. Their holy names were Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrugna. These celebrated incarnations thus appeared in 4 forms as the sons of Maharaj Dasarath. So, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Ramchandra and his brothers, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrugna, are all Vishnu Tattva, not Jiva Tattva. The Supreme Personality of Godhead expands into many forms. Here's my favorite verse. Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam. That's from the Brahma Samhita 533. Although they are one and the same, Vishnu Tattva has many forms and incarnations. As confirmed in the Brahma Samhita 539, Ramadi Murtishu Kala Niyamena Tishtam. The Lord is situated in many forms such as Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrugna, and these forms may exist in any part of His creation. All these forms exist permanently, eternally, as individual personalities of Godhead. And they resemble many candles, all equally powerful. That's also from the Brahma Samhita. Lord Ramchandra, Lakshman, Bharata, and Shatrugna, who being Vishnu Tattva, are all equally powerful. They became the sons of Maharaj Dasarath in response to prayers by the demigods. So, again, Om Gana Timiranda Shah Gananjana Shlakayat Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, instead of telling the whole story of the Ramayana, what I'm going to do today is one of my favorite activities, is to tell about the lessons we can learn from the Ramayana, which to me, and there'll be stories within the context of talking about the lessons we can learn from the Ramayana. Of course, the first lesson we learned in the first part of the Ramayana is the potency of the holy name of the Lord. Of course, we're talking right now about the holy name of Ram, but the name of Krishna and Ram, they're reference to the same person. Of course, we have the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, which has the names of Ram, and actually the name Ram in the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, it's described as also Radharaman, means Radharaman, in addition to Ram and Balaram. Sometimes people have that discussion. Are we referring to Balaram or Ram or Radharaman? But actually all. So, here's a story from the Ramayana that illustrates the potency of the holy name. Once upon a time, many eons ago, and this is in the Valmiki Ramayana, as well as in the Tulsidas Ramayana, and the Valmiki Ramayana is where I get my information from, although I'm aware of the information in the Tulsidas Ramayana, because the Valmiki Ramayana is the original Ramayana. And Tulsidas Ramayana is called a Ramacharita Manasas. You know, his meditations or his vision of Lord Rama's pastimes. And Prabhupada said there's some philosophical misunderstanding in the Tulsidas Ramayana. I'm not going to criticize, but he just said there's a tinge of something else there. So, anyway, once upon a time, there was this dacoit, and in the Valmiki Ramayana he's called Ratnagara, and he maintained his family by stealing. That's what dacoits do. That's their prescribed occupation. And so people would go by the path in the forest, and he would steal, he would kill, do all sorts of things to get money or to get goods that he would later on sell. So he was doing this to maintain his family, a wife and 2 kids. So what happened is that once upon a time, and this is again, the Valmiki Ramayana, the Sapta Rishis were walking by. Now, some of you are familiar with the Tulsidas Ramayana will know it's a description of different persons walking by. But anyway, the Sapta Rishis were walking by. And, of course, as Rishis, they didn't have much money or any other goods. So he stopped them. And he said, "Give me your money, or give me whatever you have." And they said, "We don't have any." And he got really angry with them. And they said to him, "Don't you understand that there's a law of karma?" Of course, as a Vedic thief, he understood the law of karma. You're going to get a reaction for this, killing people and stealing from people. And he said, "I know that, but I have to do my prescribed duty. My prescribed duty is to take care of my family. I have to feed my children, feed my wife, give her whatever she needs." And they said, "We understand that. However, because you're accepting this karma, are you willing, or are they willing, to share part of your karma?" And he said, "Of course they are, because they love me. This is the nature of love in this world." So they said to him, "You go back and you talk to them. And if they're willing to share your karma, all good and well." And so he went back and talked to his family. He said to his wife, "Are you willing to share the karma that I'm accruing?" And she said, "No." And then he went to his daughter and his son, and they also said the same thing. And he got very detached. He understood the nature of material love. I mean, sometimes we see this even in some of the families I know from India, that when the even from India, what to speak of the United States, when the mother or father get very old and the mother and father have signed over all their property to the children, then the children just put them away somewhere or send them to Vrindavan, especially the ladies, to become just the begging widows in Vrindavan or Govardhan or Radhakund. So anyway, so he goes back to the Saptarishis and says, "What am I to do?" And the Saptarishis say, "You should chant the name of the Lord." And he says, "I can't do it." Well, obviously he couldn't do it because he's too sinful. The name of the Lord can only appear on the lips of someone who is free from sin. So they said to him, "Okay, we'll give you this other mantra, something that's more in tune with your nature, which is the word death, which in Sanskrit is vara." So he said, "That's a great mantra." They said, "If you chant this with great determination, you'll be free from your karma." So they gave him some impetus. So he was chanting, not with the desire to achieve Krishna consciousness, but with the desire to escape from his karma. So he started chanting this mantra, Mara 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 Rama Rama. It turned into Ram. You can try that. Mara 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 Ram 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 Ram. And he became so determined in his chanting, because he was so scared of his karma, that an anthill grew around him. Whew. One of these giant anthills, not just tiny little anthill. And later on, the Saptarishis came back, and they heard the chanting from this anthill. And they thought that must be Valmiki. Of course, Valmiki means the anthill sage. That's actually the definition of the word. So, and they sprinkled the anthill, because it's a similar thing to like Hiranyakashipu, that he actually, the body disintegrated, and he was chanting, and they sprinkled it, and he came out, and he became the great devotee of Valmiki, which is an interesting story because it also illustrates the point that anyone, Kiva Vipra, Kiva Nyashi, Shudra Kenanai, Ye Krishna Tattva Veta, Say Guru Hoy. that anyone who becomes Krishna conscious understands Krishna Tattva or Rama Tattva can become guru. So he actually became the guru to the sons of Ram and Sita, Lava and Kush, and he trained them up, and he actually taught them the Ramayana, and so later on. Okay, before I get to the more stories about him and teaching Lava and Kush, so later on he established his ashram, and one day he was bathing in the Sarayu River, which is the river right there near Ayodhya. So he was bathing in the Sarayu River, and he saw a hunter kill a crane, and actually two cranes, because one, they were both engaged in anyway, conjugal ruse, so to speak, if you could say that about cranes. And he thought, this is the most cruel activity, and he cursed the hunter. He cursed them to never enjoy and suffer, basically, for a very, very long time. And the way he cursed them was in some poetry. And so it's described in the Valmiki Ramayana, this is like the origin of poetry in that particular kalpa. So he cursed them using some poetry. He's thinking, wow, poetry. Later on, Narada Muni comes, I guess the same day or later on. And Narada Muni tells him that you should compose the Ramayana utilizing this poetic meter. So he began to compose the Ramayana. And actually, he didn't write the Ramayana down because people were very intelligent in those days, and they could remember something. So he composed the Ramayana, and later on, he was able to teach the Ramayana to Lava and Kush, the sons of Sita and Ram. And he actually, he didn't go to Ayodhya and see all the different pastimes and everything like that. He envisioned the pastimes within his heart. As Prabhupada said, that when one becomes Krishna conscious, then all the pastimes of the Lord appear, and Prabhupada compared it to be a spiritual television. So he was able to envision all the pastimes as they were occurring, or even before they were occurring. He knew about the Uttara Ramayana. Uttara Ramayana means the Ramayana after Lord Rama was the king, and then eventually he calls Sita back, and Sita enters into the earth, and Lava and Kush take over the kingdom, and then even after that, there's stories, different stories about Lava and Kush. So that's the potency of the holy name. So that's a very interesting story. Of course, we understand there's other stories in the Srimad Bhagavatam, such as the story of Jamil, that illustrate the potency of the holy name. So this is very encouraging. The second lesson we can learn, I got so many lessons, we can go on for days about this, is the lesson of loyalty. Not only loyalty, obviously there's loyalty between the four brothers, but there's the loyalty between the different Rakshasas. You know, you see a really high culture there. Even the Rakshasas have a higher culture than we experience here in the Western world. Generally in the Western world, if someone makes a promise, you're more than not likely to have them break the promise. You understand? And actually, Prabhupada experienced that, and we all experience that. And the divorce rate is very high, and it's very hard to trust people nowadays. So, let's talk about some of the Rakshasas' loyalties to each other. First, the one I want to talk about was Indrajit, who was the son of Ravana. And, of course, between Ravan and Indrajit. So Indrajit, being the son of Ravan, was convinced towards the end of the fight between the demons and the devotees, between Ram and the Rakshasas, or Ram and the monkeys and the Rakshasas and their associates. Indrajit was convinced that Lakshman was the supreme personality of Godhead. He was fighting directly with Lakshman. And so the way he was convinced was that he had fired the invincible arrows of Lord Brahma, and even he had it's even described in Ramayana, he had the weapon of Vishnu, which is interesting. He was given the weapon of Vishnu, the Sudarshan Chakra, and Lord Brahma, the Brahmastra. So he kept firing them at Lakshman. And what these weapons did is they simply respected Lakshman. You know, it's invincible. It's amoga. Invincible weapons. And they just paid respects and offered obeisances to Lakshman. So he came back to his father. And he said, Dad, you're dealing with God here. You better surrender. And Dad, that is Ravan, in this particular case, he said, you should not neglect your duty, basically, to your father. And so, even though he knew he was going to die, he started fighting with Lakshman again, and then he was killed by Lakshman. He had his head cut off by Lakshman. So this is such loyalty. And we find the same loyalty between the two brothers, Ravan and Kumbhakarna. Of course, we all know that Kumbhakarna was humongous. You know, simply humongous. In fact, he was so humongous and he ate so much, this is a side story, of course, that the reason he got the benediction from Lord Brahma to have nidra asana, or sleep for a long time, is because there wasn't going to be enough food for anyone else. He was eating so much. Because we may find that in the temple too, you know, someone eats so much. Prabhupada was aware of this when he was preaching in New York, and he understood that everybody, this is an interesting point, not related to the Ramayana, but it's interesting, that each and every man there was eating at least 18 to 20 chapatis at each sitting. Yeah, I was listening to the memory. Generally, I listen to the memories. I mean, each man was anywhere between 12 to 20 chapatis. And there was another person, Stanley, who would eat, I think it was 22 chapatis at his sitting. And Prabhupada, he said, this devotee was explaining that Prabhupada would make hundreds of chapatis every morning, every day, midday for the midday prasadam. Amazing, isn't it? Here somehow the devotees don't like chapatis. I like chapatis. If they're made properly. Prabhupada made chapatis properly. They were puffed up. Prabhupada would never tolerate a chapati that wasn't puffed up. And Prabhupada, the way that they would serve Prabhupada was that they would make the chapatis fresh and they bring it into Prabhupada while it was still steaming. And then Prabhupada would put a spoon or something on top of the chapati just to test it, and the steam would come out. And that's a chapati. So I wish the devotees would learn that. Anyway, so apart from that, Kumbhakarna, he would eat so much. So when he was asking for benediction from Lord Brahma after he performed his austerities along with Ravana and that beautiful Surpanaka. Oh, sorry about that. So his mother Urmila played Surpanaka in one of the Ramayana plays. I wish I had seen that. So he asked for the throne of Indra. So the goddess of learning, Saraswati, she made him say, Nidra asana. You'll get the throne of sleep. And therefore, he was condemned to sleep forever, but Ravan interceded. And Ravan said to Lord Brahma, how could you do this? He's one of your creations. So please, mitigate this particular curse. So Lord Brahma said, okay, every 6 months he can wake up. But if he's woken up prematurely when it's not the particular time for him to wake up, that's the time he's going to die. So Ravan, when he was just confronted with his inevitable defeat, he thought, I have to bring Kumbhakarna to fight, because nobody could defeat Kumbhakarna. So he had Kumbhakarna woken up, and that was a really hard job. He had these elephants marching on top of Kumbhakarna, and people playing trumpets, cooking a lot of food, putting it by Kumbhakarna's nostrils, preparing a lot of liquor for him. He was so big, it's described that where he was sleeping, when he would breathe out, when he was sleeping, it would just like push everybody out of the cave or the house that he was in. Boom. And he'd breathe in, he would just suck everybody. I mean, it was humongous. Humongous. So anyway, so he came out, and he sort of told Ravan, didn't I advise you not to do this, to, basically not to kidnap Sita and to send back Sita? And Ravan said, it's too late. You got to be loyal to your brother. Again, the same thing. And so Kumbhakarna, understanding that he was going to die, he paid obeisances to his brother. I mean, such loyalty that someone has. This is the point. This is the lessons I'm bringing forth. Such lessons. And so he comes out and he starts fighting, and he's just like eating all these monkeys. And describes one of the monkeys are coming out of his ears. Just like he's destroying the monkey army. And tremendous battle. And even Vibhishan, the younger brother, tries to talk him out of it. And he says to Vibhishan that I'm just basically, I'm just angry, please step out of the way. And, I'm serving Ravan. This is my duty. Serving the older brother. It's actually also interesting. Older brother, younger brother. There's etiquette. In the West, it's hard for us to understand this, isn't it? But in India, for example, you won't have the younger brother get married until the older brother's married, isn't it? Generally. I mean, sometimes there's exceptions to this, especially if the older brother decides to take sannyas. But, there's such etiquette. I mean, this is what makes a society cultured. I mean, in the West, we don't have, to a large extent, we don't have this culture, this etiquette, between senior. I was just listening to a Prabhupada memory. It was, anyway, one of the devotees took sannyas 2 minutes after someone else took sannyas. And he said, now you're my senior sannyas bhai, or God. And of course, we don't want to carry that too far. So what happened eventually is that he was killed by Ram. And Ram cut off his arms and basically his head and threw him into the ocean. So, but he sacrificed everything for his brother. And of course, the typical example of loyalty, most important, is the loyalty between the four brothers, Ram, Lakshman, Bharata, and Shatrugna. And Lakshman would never leave the side of Ram, and Shatrugna would never leave the side of Bharata. And I told the story last night about this, that there was the three wives of Dasarath, Kaushalya, Kaikeya, and Sumitra. And when they were getting the kheer that Rishi Shringa had organized, and I'm not going to tell the story of Rishi Shringa, we told it last night, they divided the kheer up in a very interesting way. Like, basically, half went to Kaushalya, half went to Kaikeyi, and they gave, Kaikeyi and Kaushalya gave some of their kheer to Sumitra. So you see, that's why, I mean, obviously it's a pastime, but it explains to a certain extent from an external viewpoint why Lakshman was inseparable from Ram and Shatrughna was inseparable from Bharat. So, I'll tell some stories about that. Especially, this is very heart-rendering, that when Ram was sent into exile by his father Dasarath at the insistence of Kaikeyi, who was influenced by Manthara, then Bharat, when he came back, because he was staying with his uncle, Bharat and Shatrughna, first of all, Bharat rejected his mother. Now, sometimes we see that brothers, they even kill their other brothers, or they kill their father, or they imprison their father in order to become the next king. Obviously, this happens quite often in the Muslim, I wouldn't say Muslim society, but at least in India, with Aurangzeb, isn't it? He imprisoned his father, and he killed his brothers, just so that he could become the king. So, Bharat, when he came back and he found out what his mother Kaikeyi had done, he rejected Kaikeyi. He said, "You're not my mother." Such loyalty. Of course, you may say, what's the loyalty between Bharat and his mother? Well, there was the loyalty between the four brothers. Because if the mother does something like that, she's no longer considered like mother. There's this particular point where someone violates etiquette or violates spiritual practices, then that person can be rejected in that particular position. It's really important to understand it. So he said, "You're no longer my mother." And Shatrughna, he almost killed Manthara. It's described that she was walking around. Manthara, of course, was the one who influenced Kaikeyi to influence Dasarath to ban Ram. So she was walking around with all these jewels that she had gotten because she had been given these jewels by Kaikeyi, because Kaikeyi was so pleased, so-called pleased, so pleased with what Manthara had done to tell her that actually Ram would banish Bharat, which is untrue. Banish Bharat and then turn Kaikeyi into a servant. She actually just whipped up this frenzy into Kaikeyi's Kaikeyi's consciousness. So you see, by bad association, that's actually another lesson. By bad association, here was Kaikeyi, who actually loved Ram just as much, or perhaps even more than her own son. Because when she first had this conversation with Manthara, she said, "That's ridiculous, Manthara. Ram treats me like mother. I am his mother." But Manthara just poisoned the mind of Kaikeyi. And we see this nowadays too, especially on the internet. People are poisoning other people's minds and encouraging offensive behavior or offensive words. So she, she just whipped up her envy, and Kaikeyi did what she did. So anyway, getting back to Shatrughna, he took Manthara and he was dragging her through the halls, ready to kill Manthara, and all of her jewels were being strewn all over the place. But then Bharat said, it's not appropriate. Don't kill her. You shouldn't kill ladies. All right. So Bharat had rejected Kaikeyi, and Bharat actually approached Kausalya and said that you're my mother. This other lady is not my mother. Such devotion to Ram. So then Bharat became very much determined, we're going to bring back Ram, and he's going to become the king. I'm not going to be the king. So what he did is he called for the whole army and soldiers and everything like that, and he asked them, first of all, to construct a beautiful road all the way to where Ram was. Not only were they going to go and bring back Ram, but they wanted to go in style. So this big road. It's described in the Ramayana. I forget how wide it was. It was quite wide. And so they took the whole army with the sign, the Kovida, and marched to where Ram was. Ram, Sita, and of course, Lakshman. And as they were approaching, Lakshman spied the army, and he saw it was the army of Ayodhya. And he thought, and this is a pastime, of course. He loved Bharat. But he thought, Bharat has come to kill Ram, so Ram will not take over the kingdom later on when he finishes with his exile. So he pulled out his bow. It's described, sometimes Lakshman is described as a little impetuous in the Ramayana, isn't it? Because of his love for Ram. It's described the whole time they were in the forest. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. Of course, the Lord never sleeps anyway. But he never rested the whole time because he was guarding Ram and Sita. He constructed the cottages that they were living in. So he pulled out his bow and he thought, I'm going to kill them all. And Ram basically said, calm down. You should know Bharat. Bharat would never think of anything like this. We have such love. And so Lakshman calmed down at that particular juncture. And then Ram and Bharat met, and Lakshman was there because Lakshman apologized to Bharat. He said, I'm sorry. I was getting ready to kill you. Because he was so loyal to Ram. And so then there ensued a discussion between Ram and Bharat as to what should be done. And Bharat said, I'm not accepting the kingdom. You're the king. And so you should come back. And so back and forth. Not going to get into the details of the discussion. But ultimately, Ram said that if you really love me like you say you do, you'll do what I say. Because he was thinking, I love you, but I love you to do what I want to do. You understand? So sometimes we find this, someone says, I love you. Like, well, can you get this for me? Well, I love you. But real love means even if the person you love wants to send you away to do something, like there's a story with Prabhupada and his servant, that sometimes Prabhupada would send, of course, the story of Harikesh. Harikesh was Prabhupada's servant, and Prabhupada sent him away to preach. And he really was reluctant to go. Basically he was crying that he had to leave Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada sent him away to preach, and then he was so successful in preaching in Eastern Europe. And then Prabhupada jokingly said when he came back to visit him, he said, you were simply sitting here rotting. Because serving the spiritual master, serving Srila Prabhupada is certainly not rotting, as far as I understand. So, but still, there's service and separation. So Ram made that point to Bharat that actually if you love means you do what the person you love wants. He said, you should go back. And Bharat was so dedicated, he said, okay, I will go back to Ayodhya, and I will take charge of the kingdom, but I will not enter Ayodhya. I will live on the outskirts of a place called Nandigram, and I will worship your shoes as the actual emperor, the actual king. So he established the shoes on an altar, and he was offering obeisances and serving the shoes, and never entered at that particular juncture into Ayodhya. Amazing dedication, isn't it? I mean, no greed, no lust, just the desire to serve his brother. And not only that, while he was outside of Ayodhya, he was living under the earth because Ram, who had taken a vow of austerity, was sleeping on top of the earth. Of course, Lakshman used to put some leaves there so he'd have a soft place. So Bart did not want to be in a higher position, even in regard to the earth, than Ram. So he had like a trench dug, and he slept under the earth. Amazing. Just amazing, Bart's dedication. And he took a vow. His vow was that if Ram doesn't come back, on the actual day that the exile is finished, I'm going to jump in the fire. Can you imagine? Such love and dedication. So, so Ram arranged that he came back on the actual day when Bart was actually. Whoops. Someone's adjusting the camera. So when Bart was actually circumambulating the fire to jump into the fire, and Ram came back on that day. Someone's watching this. That's good. They're adjusting the camera. That's good. Really? You have the camera control with you? That's cool. That's cool. So Ram came back, and not only did Ram come back on the actual day, but he was afraid that Bart was going to jump into the fire prematurely. So he sent back Hanuman to tell. So Hanuman flew back and he said, Ram is now coming back. And so Bart, with so much devotion, just watched in the sky, because Ram was coming back on the Pushpaka Vimana. The Pushpaka Vimana was the flower airplane which had been stolen by Ravan from his brother Kuvera. And it had on it the monkeys, the bears, and even the Rakshasas who were favorable, like Vibhishan. They were all coming back. It could expand or contract according to what was needed. And it came back, and then Ram and Lakshman and Bart and Shatrughna greeted each other, and they're very happy. So that's a story of loyalty. And another lesson we can learn is the lesson of Dharma. That's a really important lesson from the Ramayana. And one story about Dharma is that Ram, and this is a heart-wrenching story. Of course, Ram was in charge of the kingdom, and there was some criticism going on because Ram had done something according to the etiquette or the culture then that was considered improper. What is it that he had done? He had accepted Sita back. I'm not sure if I agree with this particular cultural item, but he accepted Sita back after she had spent almost a year in Ravana's kingdom. Of course, Ravan never went close to Sita Devi. Even Sita Devi wasn't even there. It was Maya's Sita, and the real Sita was taken care of by Agni during that time. So, plus, even Ravan didn't go near Maya Sita, because Maya Sita held this blade of grass and said, if you come near me, if you approach me, then you'll die. And Ravan was sort of afraid, because previously he had actually forced himself upon Ramba, one of the Heavenly Society girls. And her husband, who was Nalakuvara, of the fame of Nalakuvara. Remember that story from the twin Arjun trees? Manigriva, Nalakuvara. So anyway, he cursed Ravan to die next time he forced himself upon a lady. So Ravan really respected curses. So Ravan, uh, so what happened is that because Sita Devi apparently was with Ravan for a whole year, uh, it was not considered proper for Ram to accept her back in the kingdom. As I said, I don't necessarily agree with that particular cultural item. And Ram was being criticized. The main thing is that Ram was being criticized. And being criticized is not helpful if you're a king. In fact, the king, in those days, the king or the emperor, would allow the citizens to directly come to him if they had any complaints. So it was very rare for them to criticize behind the back of the king or the emperor because they had the right to come. In fact, there's some descriptions in the traditional Indian kingdoms, even in historical times, that the kings would actually have like a bell at their palace where anyone could come and ring. And then, of course, even there's that story in the Ramayana of how a dog came and complained. A very interesting story in the Ramayana. To Ram, this dog came to the gate of the palace and said, "I have a complaint." You know, talking dog. He said, "I have a complaint." And Lakshman was sent to the gate, and he said, "What do you want?" He said, "I have a complaint. I need to speak to Ram." So Lakshman went back to Ram and said to Ram, "There's a dog who has a complaint." Okay. And what should I do? And Ram said, "Let him in." And this is quite interesting because the king or the president or emperor, whatever, is considered to be the protector of all the praja. Prabhupada makes this point many, many times, of all the entities in his kingdom, not only the entities in human bodies. So Ram says, "Bring him in." So the dog comes in and says, "I have a complaint." And Ram says, "Okay." And then Dogavacha. The dog said, "This Brahmana has been beating me." This shows how fair Ram is. We'll get back to the story of Ram and Sita in a second. But he shows how fair Ram was with all the citizens in the kingdom. So the Brahmin has been beating me. And Ram said, "Bring the Brahmin." So they bring the Brahmin in. And then Ram says, "Did you beat this dog?" And the Brahmin says, "Yes." Not tone of voice. "Yes." Sorry, use the wrong tone of voice. "Yes, I was hungry." You know, sometimes you understand that blood sugar goes down when you're hungry and you get angry a lot. Whew. We deal with so many cases of anger amongst devotees in different temples. Anyway, so Ram said, "What should we do with this Brahmin?" And so there was a discussion. All the different Brahmins and the priests, and they all discuss, what are you going to do with the Brahmin? Because he hit the dog. It was unfair. Our business is to protect all living entities. And people came up with so many discussions, and Ram said, "No, not a good idea." And then they asked the dog. They asked the dog, what should we do with the Brahmin? And the dog said, "Just make him in charge of the ashram." And everyone was shocked. "What do you mean, make him in charge of, ashram or something like that?" And then Ram said, "Let the dog explain." So the dog explained that previously in my last life I was in charge and there were sinful activities going on in the ashram, and I'm responsible for the sinful activities. That's scary. Just like GBC. Prabhupada said if GBC makes a mistake. Anyway, I'm telling you what he said. can repeat it another time and scare me. So we're responsible. So that's why the dog became a dog. So you see, Ram was very, very equal. Getting back to the story, so Ram basically was concerned with how the citizens thought of him because it would impede his ability to rule. Because the king's ability to rule in the Vedic system was based upon love and trust, just like in the Krishna conscious movement, isn't it? Should be based upon love and trust, not that I'm your guru, and if you don't listen to me, you go to hell, Prabhu. No, it should be based on love and trust, and that's if our society is not based on that, if it's just based upon fear, then that's not a Krishna conscious society. So it was important for Ram to maintain the trust of all his citizens. So in order to maintain the trust of his citizens, following the Dharma, because the Dharma of a king, we're talking about Dharma, the Dharma of the king is to consider all the citizens equally, not to be partial to his children or his wife. They're all his praja. Praja means like those who were born, isn't it? Or your sons or daughters. It's interesting, isn't it? They're all his sons and daughters equally, because if he discriminates, he's not a king, a proper king. He's like the modern day kings, presidents, prime ministers who send money to a Swiss bank account. I'm not saying the president does that in the United States, but that's the modern society. So Ram, he sends Sita away. Now, of course, there's an esoteric reason for that. The esoteric reason is, I was talking about this last night, that he wanted, and Sita wanted to enjoy this vipralamba, these mood of intense hankering and intense love that's there where there's this separation. And we see this, of course, in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was teaching us about vipralamba, and even Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his wife Vishnupriya. And we see this in the pastimes of course, Krishna, who left Vrindavan, and the gopis were, for a long time, over 100 years, just like lamenting his separation. So this brings the lover and beloved closer together. So that's an esoteric reason. But exoterically, Ram was teaching us the lesson of dharma, doing your duty, doing the right thing. So, of course, this vipralamba, because we don't have much time, this vipralamba was taught in different different interactions too. There's the Ram and Sita, which I just mentioned. There's Ram and Dasarath. Dasarath actually died feeling separation from Ram. And of course, that was also because he was cursed because he had killed this young man. He was using his arrow and firing the arrow, thinking he was firing at a deer drinking water, when it was actually a young man who was actually getting water for his parents, his blind parents. So he killed the young man. Dasarath, by accident, killed the young man, and the young man's parents cursed Dasarath to die, feeling separation from his son, just like they were dying, feeling separation from their son. So, but in any case, that's the mood of separation, tense vipralamba, which Dasarath was experiencing. And also, anyway, we mentioned Lakshmi Priya and Lord Chaitanya and Krishna and the gopis, etc. So that's another lesson we can learn about vipralamba. So I guess that's it. We have another 20 more lessons to learn, but we only went through 3 of them today. So all glorious to His divine grace, Srila Prabhupada, Sita Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman ki jai. Rama Om Vishnu Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shimate Bhakti Vedanta Samani Dinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Muramani Pacha Devi Visesha Shunyavadi Pasachagade Sacharane Visesha Ashachari Chari Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gajana Shiva Sati Gaura Vrindadaya Shri Krishna Gadada Shiva Sadi Gaura Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Shiva Sadi Gaura Shiva Sadi Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Shiva Sadi Gaura Vrindadaya Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, 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 Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram. Jai Om.